Entry and welcome to the Veteran of Foreign Wars building on Boynton Avenue in Plattsburgh for their Veterans Day commemoration ceremony. Len Skillen is the commander of this Post 125, and Ralph Teft is the master of ceremonies.
Post 125 on this date, which of course is Veterans Day. Some people don't believe it's today, but that's regardless. It is today. I would like to welcome the Gold Star mothers, fellow vets, ladies and gentlemen, as our guests. And should we take a moment right now to remember the people who died during the 9/11/01 tragedy? Just a moment, please. Thank you. For opening prayer, Ms. Ann Boomgardner. Oh, beg your pardon. Thank you, sir. Post the colors, please, gentlemen. I'm not used to that one. Stand, please. Thank you, gentlemen. For our opening prayer, Auxiliary Chaplain Ann Boomgard. Sorry, Ann.
Let us pray. O God, eternal Father. O God, eternal Father and everlasting King of heaven and earth, we render these acknowledgments of thy supreme dominion over us and gratitude for your paternal solicitude and watchfulness. As we gather here in humble recognition of thy divine providence, we beseech you to usher us into our world of confusion and doubt, the peace and tranquility which alone can come from thee. We beseech thee to bring the blessings of understanding to the families and friends in this and other lands of those who have given their lives that men may be free. Grant, O God, that those closest to the fallen may mingle at the pain of their home losses, and with the ennobling light of sacrifice and civilization, sacrifice for a better world for this and other generations yet unborn. Grant us now that continued blessing upon unity and strength makes victories possible in war, that we may win greater victories of peace. Amen.
And now our songstress will sing for us. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early night what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rockets red clear, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land
While we're all standing, the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I have some remarks from our commander. I've had the privilege or the pleasure, whichever, of knowing this gentleman for about 35 years. I consider him a friend. I consider him a buddy. Sometimes I wonder about how he thinks about me, but anyway. Please.
Thank you very much, Ralph, and at my command, sit down. Ralph is correct. I first met Ralph in Roswell, New Mexico, when we were bringing a KC-135 unit up to this base, and I had the privilege to be on the detachment to get down to find out about how trained up these killers were that were coming up here. After one day down there, I thought Ralph was the mayor of Roswell rather than a boom operator in our Air Force. Pretty popular. On behalf of the entire membership, welcome to VFW Post 125 Veterans Day services, and thank you for your attendance. I have a short poem that is most appropriate for this occasion. You may recognize it. The author is unknown. They were called to serve. They never asked why. They fought for freedom for you and I. Their families and friends were left behind. Their goal was peace for all mankind. Fighting for liberty and justice for all. Some lived to see it, but some did fall. Each one risked their life so freedom could ring. Thank you all for everything. Today, I would ask you to focus on those veterans who lived to see it, as the poem states. To them, I say, thank you for your service to our country. God bless you, and God bless America.
I'd like to introduce the table. On my extreme left, Glenn Clausen, our chaplain. Next, George Seifert, our speaker for the day. Next, Gina Harrison, auxiliary president. You've met Leonard. And our songstress, Edie Seifert, and yes, her Mr. and Mrs. Seifert. And Ann Boone Gardner, chaplain in the auxiliary. Officers we have today with us are our adjutant, Lando Valley, and Chris Bogler, second vice commander, right? Right, okay. Okay, now we'd like to have some remarks from the auxiliary president, Ms. Jean Harrison.
First of all, I want to welcome everybody. I'm very, very nervous. On September 11th, all our hearts were crushed. Today we are remembering all those who have died in war. Also the prisoners of war and the missing in action. And those who are fighting for us today. God bless America, and God bless all veterans.
Now we'll have the laying of the wreaths, please. Starting with our Gold Star mothers. And now Beth will escort the ladies. The ladies auxiliary. Yeah, you're right.
On behalf of the Ladies Auxiliary Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, I place this emblem of eternity. Its color bespeaks life everlasting. Thus do we immortalize the brave deeds of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have given their lives on land, on sea, and in the air.
The post, 125, he won't be escorted. Now, Vietnam vets. Thank you, one and all. Our guest speaker today is George Seifert, who was a retired colonel from the Infantry U.S. Army Reserve. Colonel Seifert was commissioned to ROTC as a second lieutenant, Armor Branch, and served in Korea in 1958 as a tank commander, tank platoon leader. As a reserve officer, he was in command an infantry battalion, drill sergeant, Academy, beg your pardon, and Engineer Training Brigade. He's a graduate of the Armory School, Infantry Advanced School, Command and General Staff College, and U.S. Army War College, and retired with 30 years active and reserve service in 1982. George, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure what this portends with Ralph scheduling me just before the firing squad. We'll see. Commander Skillion, Chaplain Clausen, Ms. Harrison, Mrs. Conley, honored guests, friends and families of the VFW, and my fellow veterans. It was some 3 months ago when your program chairman, Ralph, invited me to be your guest this morning. I was honored and accepted, imagining that the thrust of today's remarks would consist of the time-honored references to the service and dedication of America's veterans and how by their sacrifices and those of their families have perpetuated our democracy and our American way of life. Those tried and true accolades were perfectly normal in normal times. But now, these are not normal times. Recent attacks on American institutions have changed all that. And so, as I mentally prepared for today's remarks, my thoughts change daily as events change daily, horrifically impacting on our very existence. Events were changing so fast that trying to compose a paper was like trying to paint a moving train. So instead of attempting to maintain some relationship with current events, I thought I would look over my shoulder and share some of my personal experiences, some of my memories of times that vacillated between normalcy and reality. Maybe we can share some memories together. Try to remember what you were doing and where you were as some of these events unfolded. When I was a youngster, Veterans Day was called Armistice Day to commemorate the end of the hostilities of World War I, which, as you all know, occurred on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. My dad was a Navy man in that war, and as he was stationed ashore at Newport, Rhode Island, he didn't qualify for the VFW. But he was a charter member of the Legion, and Post 48 in Newton, Mass. had a 30-man rifle drill team that was a showpiece. And as a kid, I got to carry the model 1898 bolt-action Springfield rifle to the start of every Armistice and Memorial Day parade. The parade route went about 2 miles from the National Guard Armory down Washington Street to Newton Corners, and afterwards the drill team went back to the Armory to tell war stories, or whatever veterans do after parades, and I got to carry the rifle back home. My young friends pestered me to allow them to carry the rifle, and I was pleased to allow them because it started to get heavy. On those occasions, there were flags everywhere, and red, white, and blue bunting lined the parade route. Every such holiday required that we climb out on the roof and put out the flagpole and the flag, which was a real treat for a kid to be able to climb out on the roof. During the parades, there were always 5 or 6 marching bands. Veterans organizations had a couple. The high school turned out, and there were a couple of little bands from the WPA, which some of you old folks may recall. Spectators were 3 deep along the route, and World War I vets were cheered as they marched along. There was a sprinkling of Spanish-American War vets in cars or on the reviewing stand. And the next day's paper always had a photo of some old Civil War survivor riding in an open convertible and waving to the crowd. We used to visit the Chelsea Naval Hospital and bring presents to some old soldiers who had been gassed in the trenches in France and whose lungs were so burned out that they were barely surviving. In 1938, the drill team won the state championship, and in the following year at the national convention, they became national champions. I still have that old rifle and the tunic with the national championship patch. In the 1930s, the Depression still held the country in its grip, but still, for a kid, these were normal times. Then one Sunday evening, my aunt and uncle came over for their monthly dinner and visit. My uncle burst through the door shouting, "Turn on the radio! The Japanese have just bombed Pearl Harbor." Times weren't normal any longer. In 1941, I was only 11 years old, and I figured that I could join the Navy when I reached 17. Anyway, I did volunteer to become an air raid messenger with an armband and a real tin hat, painted white. But because of my age, I couldn't be sent out with any messages if there was any chance of a bombing raid. As a matter of fact, until I was 12, I couldn't be out after darkness. So much for my quest for glory. I missed that big war, but in due time I became a second lieutenant, and I shipped off to Korea to command a tank platoon. This was 1953. Police action in The Korean War was called a police action, Mr. Truman's War, and came so close to the end of World War II that it became the Forgotten War. It was still a conscript army, and as such involved every community who supplied a draftee for the forces. This alone was sufficient to demand respect and gratitude toward our folks in uniform. The civilians did respect the military. I'd like to share a little vignette with you. The evening before our troop ship sailed out of San Francisco Bay, 4 of us lieutenants went into Oakland for that last supper ashore. We were in uniform and ate up a storm. Wine, shrimp, crab, filet mignon, wine, you know the drill. And when we asked the waiter for our tab, he said it had been taken care of. Been taken care of by an old gentleman who was having dinner with his wife over in the corner. Well, we went over to thank him, and he told us that he'd been wounded in France in 1918. And he said, "God bless you, young man. Go and do your duty, but come home safely to us." When the ship left the dock the next day, there was a band playing the Army song, caissons go rolling along. Longshoremen were waving little flags and saluted. I still recall the name of that little restaurant in Oakland, Adolph's. And I get a little teary-eyed when I think of that old gentleman with his kindness toward us and his blessing as we headed off to the unknown. In the next decade, as our troops shipped off to Southeast Asia, there weren't as many bands playing or people waving flags, as the age of TV put instant war into our living rooms, and the flower children and the media in Hollywood conspired to degrade the sacrifices of our folks in uniform, totally ignoring the words of General MacArthur, who once said, "Soldiers hate war more than anyone, because they must bear the brunt of it." We were a nation in transition, perhaps long overdue, but it wasn't long before we faced another option concerning our armed forces. It was 1990 and Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. What should we do? Well, Congress debated, and 47 out of 100 senators voted against doing anything. They voted against getting involved. At this point, I was retired from the reserve, but my oldest son commanded a tank company in Germany and has his men and equipment shipped off to Saudi Arabia. My days on that troop ship a generation before came back with stark reality. And all I could think of was, "God bless you, young men. Go and do your duty, but come home to us safely." Thank goodness we did that one with sufficient forces. Air power was magnificent, and the planners did their homework before committing the massive assault. The Hail Mary sweep around the flank of the Imperial Guards was classic. And my only reservation was that 100-hour war perhaps should have been a 200-hour war. The armed forces returned to march in victory, and the nation returned to normalcy. But normalcy has a way of becoming abnormal when you relax your vigilance. It wasn't too long before we were more interested in scandal than security. We had lost respect for our elected officials, and the nation lost respect for the rule of law. If you've been following the feature articles in the paper back in September this year, you should be well read into a time when abnormalcy struck this area. On a day in early September, when merchants were going about their business, citizens were taking care of daily chores, children were in school, when suddenly our soil was attacked. There was a calling up of the militia. Young men came forward to take up arms. Ships were manned, and we prepared for the unknown. Some civilians even went through traumas as their lives and normalcy was threatened. But the spirit and dedication of our sailors and soldiers prevailed as always. The armed forces are the cement that binds this nation together in times of turmoil. We will proving to the world that Americans will rise up and stand united whenever our land or way of life is threatened. Those were scary days, that September day. That September day long ago now, when the soldiers under the command of General Alexander McComb and the sailors under Commodore Thomas McDonough were victorious at the Battle of Plattsburgh, fought and won on September 11th, 1814. We now have another September 11th, 2001. Another attack on our soil. Another rush to arms. But once again, as they will always do, our veterans and folks in uniform will provide the stuff that heroes are made of, the spirit that unites all Americans. This time, our heroes are not just airmen, sailors, and soldiers, but firefighters, policemen, medical technicians, chaplains, and construction workers. Once more, Americans are standing united. Flags are displayed in honor of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who are placing their lives in peril. Because these are not normal times, we are suffering abnormal times because we failed to be vigilant. We became apathetic. We cut our funding for the military. We decimated our intelligence budgets and allowed our egos and our two-ocean boundary to prevail over common sense. Today, I ask all veterans to take an active role in restoring what has been lacking. Be vigilant. Report anything suspicious. We're only 20 miles south of the border. Push your elected officials to restore funding necessary for the defense of the land. Stand up and defy anyone who attempts to degrade our American way of life. We can, as veterans, aid in restoring normalcy. This gathering today demonstrates normalcy. Veterans, families of veterans who have suffered as only loved ones can in time of peril, children who prayed every night that their fathers or mothers or sisters or brothers in uniform would come home safely, and friends and neighbors who come here today to honor a group of patriots who, at one time in their lives, were called to serve their country, who answered that call and who now gather like a band of brothers, each with his or her own memories of days long past, of fallen comrades, and of friendships that still call us together on these hallowed occasions. Each of us have our own memories of what is, what was, or what might have been. Thank you for allowing me to share my memories with you. God bless you.
Thank you, George. That was very good. Firing squad? I'm going to get outside. Would you please stand? And I believe Edie's going to have a sing-along with us at At this time, you can stand as well. Stay standing for a while.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
That concludes our services. I appreciate everybody being here. I especially appreciate the people on my right and left for helping me out here. Now, thanks to our club manager, Nancy, with a smiling face, and Mary, not so contrary, we have a luncheon for you. Thank you very much. I beg your pardon, and you are, thank you for being here.
Be gracious unto us, O Lord, and bless us as we depart from this place. Stretch forth thy protection of guard our country, that we, being devoted to thy service, may ever be defended by thy power. Protect all the men and women who are and will be involved in this war against the terrorists of the world. We ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
Just a quick word. I want to thank Ralph. He had the guts to get up here and do this. I've done it a few times. It's not easy. How about a hand for Ralph? Hey, you make a mistake or two now and then, but you know, we're all human. Thank you very much. Please enjoy the lunch. And thank you again for attending.
You've been watching the Veterans Day commemoration ceremony at the VFW on Boynton Avenue in Plattsburgh. And especially important in these times since our country is at war. This is Foxy Gagnon on behalf of everyone at North Country Cable Network saying thank you for watching and God bless America. Good night, North Country.
December 7th.